Hi everyone, it's Martin Shkreli. It's July 2nd. Happy 4th of July in advance. Markets are actually open tomorrow for half the day and then closed on the 4th of July. It's episode 11. I'm so happy I've been able to do 11 straight weeks. I'm not sure if I've been able to do 11 straight weeks of anything in my life, so this is a big achievement for me. A little tongue-in-cheek. It was an interesting week. I spent most of the week out of the markets. I have a big thing I'm doing, you may know, and it'll be the same thing sort of for the next several weeks, but I'll be back to sort of watching the markets regularly in a few weeks during the day. Regardless of that, the yield curve started to steepen again. So there was all bonds sold off, which I think is actually pretty healthy. And this is kind of why we're in this Goldilocks environment. I think there's something to something to that. So you see the 10-year is up to 2.31. It was at 2.15 or so last week. So it's a pretty big sell-off. And the twos didn't sell off nearly as much. So we had a nice steepening, which I think is probably what we want to see right now. Although 1 week of steepening after 5 weeks of flattening doesn't mean that we're out of the woods. Reminds me of that Taylor Swift song. And I would actually like to see an even steeper yield curve. In years past, the yield curve was much, much steeper. Obviously, we're in an environment that's not, the same as any other environment in the past, but it is kind of interesting. It was a pretty bad week for equities. The portfolio I manage for this podcast had its first down week. I think it kind of had to happen at some point, but it's up. We'll get to the portfolio in a minute, but for the end of June, it was up 4%, which is, it was really lucky. I've been on fire with the portfolio, and we'll talk about that later. I don't think it'll ever be this good again, but 4% for a half invested portfolio that's market neutral is pretty much as good as you'll ever get in life. So lucky week for me. But the Nasdaq was down 2%. I guess European equities also got hit. Not that I watched them too closely, but the euro rallied pretty significantly, and the dollar fell against the euro and the franc, probably because there's this expectation that Europe will raise interest rates faster. Bitcoin had a bad week, but it's still up 10% for the month. The month obviously ended on Friday, so as did Q2. So get ready for earnings season. But all beta had a bad week, and I think Bitcoin will become a proxy, or already is a proxy, quite frankly, for beta. And you can see that when Bitcoin's like double beta, basically, right? So if you look at, I'd say it's 4 beta. So if you look at what's like traditionally thought of as sort of 2 times beta, which is biotech, and if I exclude the pharma part of biopharma, bio is probably down more like 3 to 5%. So biotech is almost always the highest beta, and stuff like tech is in the same ballpark. So you had a pretty bad week, and Nasdaq is sort of mostly that. So anyway, Bitcoin is sort of seems to magnify whatever you see in the other parts. So anyway, we'll see if Bitcoin decouples or not, but it's interesting to see it sort of trade lockstep, at least for a week. So lockstep, maybe not the right word, but at least for a week it trades sort of in line with a sell-off in risky assets. Risky assets tend to move together. Now, crude has been has been beaten up pretty bad. We'll say that. It's a G-rated show. And it finally had kind of a recovery there for a minute, but I wouldn't confuse that. Crude's still in a bear market, and again, I wonder if it's a sort of permanent change that is not going to be changing anytime soon. And I regret telling Soldier Boy to go long crude. It's been a bad call, so Soldier Boy will never invest with me again. But that's life. So that's really it for the markets, and this will be a short. During my trial, all these updates will be somewhat short. So just keep that in mind. My Xbox is trying to listen to me.
Even if you haven't made the jump
So-
to 4K TV yet.
Sorry about that. My Xbox thinks I was talking to my Xbox, but I'm not. All right, so June, like I said, it's the June month end. I did a little bit of a broader search, not just stocks I follow very closely, but even some stocks I don't follow too closely, because I think it's a fun way to sort of find some new stocks to play with. And this is a stock that I looked at for quite some time. It's called Angie's Inc. or Anges or something like that, and it's a weird gene therapy company in Japan. You can see it's about a 60 billion yen cap, so about a 600 million US cap, and it's basically a worthless company. And it's had this weird comeback. You can see it went from 200 yen to 800 yen, and it's more or less worthless. So I think it'd be kind of interesting to short. I know they keep trying to get their drug approved, but it doesn't work. Avio is kind of a name from the past. This is a company that's more or less was left for dead, but their kinase inhibitor may have a second life. I don't think it will have a second life, although I don't love shorting microcaps, but it's up to 245 million market cap, so that's actually not so bad. Maybe I'll short some. They don't have I don't think they have too much cash. Let's take a look. No, well, Bloomberg's always tough to use. Doesn't look like they have any cash, so could be a really good short. Let me write that down. Short Avio. Okay. Who said I don't give you guys good ideas? NantQuest is Patrick Soon-Chiung's company. That is a good point, Josh. They do have to split their profits, if they'll ever have any profits. Or are you talking about Avio or Anges? Probably both. NantQuest has always been a kind of a crap company. Dynavax, I kind of want to eventually do a deep dive. This intratumoral drug, I think, is not so exciting. We'll have to sort of see how it plays out, but you know, I'm not sure that this one's worth trading, to be honest. It's probably a short, but at 500 million, like I said, I'm not sure it's worth trading. Loxo has been hovering around its highs. I want to sort of do a little quantitative work. When I did some brief quant studies in, I want to say 09 to 10 and 11. This is the kind of stock you would buy in one of my algorithms, and it's sort of a weird explanation, but basically, once a stock has gone through a large move with volume, and then there's a trend with low volume, I tend to think that trend continues, and that's been a pretty good, sort of a pretty good predictor vis-a-vis a different algorithm where a stock goes through a big volume day and it continues to have big volume days. I tend to think that the gap gets filled. So why that's the case, I'll sort of explain some other time. We'll do some quantitative work together at some point. But Loxo, I think, is somewhat interesting as a long still. But again, I missed this thing when I wanted to buy it at before the spike. Clovis is sort of interesting. They've had this similar situation happen where people think they should have the same market cap as Tesaro, which is 7 billion, and now Clovis is 4.5 billion, and they more or less have the same financial situation and drug situation. So it's kind of an interesting arbitrage if you wanted to go long Clovis and go short Tesaro. Cadman's always been a shitty, crappy company. Excuse me, I said a snizzy company. I meant to say crappy company. Please don't ruin my ad revenue opportunity. Anyway, Cadman had a dead cat bounce. I wouldn't take that too seriously. This company called Strongbridge is actually super interesting, and you can see it's breaking out quite a bit. And so we'll see if that'll continue. Portola got this sort of surprise surprise approval. And so this is actually an example of something that might reverse, but independent of that, we'll have to look at Portola at some point. They have a factor 10 drug, so it'll be pretty interesting. So anyway, one of the reasons I do this is, like I said many times, if you look at look at this chart or table, there are 14, 15, 16 stocks that were up 40% or more. And I deliberately have excluded really small companies that you couldn't maybe get a position on. If you're running $1 billion hedge fund, okay, maybe it's not 16, maybe it's more like 5 or 10. But again, you really don't have a lot to complain for in life when in just biotech, biopharma, a selected table of stocks includes all the longs and shorts that you could sort of handle. There are plenty to choose from. If you were short Alder, which we'll talk about in a second, or any of these other stocks, you had a lot of opportunity to make a really nice long-short portfolio. So again, I only got a few of these, Omeros and PTC, but that's all you needed to have an amazing month, which I did have. Nobody's going to get all of these, or you'd be up 30% in a month. So obviously, just getting one or two is something to be very proud of. I don't think I get any of these shorts, but again, it's not just about getting the really outsized movers. It certainly helps when you get an outsized move, but you can get an outsized IRR with a small move, and we've gone over that many times. So that's the sort of month to date. Current opinions, I added, why is Omeros here? It's not what I meant to write. Ironwood, Fibergen, and Prothena. I probably meant to write, I definitely didn't mean to put Omeros there, so I don't know why I put it there. But I probably missed adding another stock. Anyway, those are 3 new good shorts, so we'll kind of see how that shakes out. I'll be working on all of these. I did start shorting Ironwood, which I'll go through in a second. Macrogenics looks really exciting to me. I still have to do a little bit more work on it before I get too excited, but that one's pretty exciting. I sold all my Horizon. I just don't know if it's undervalued or not. I'll figure that out some other time, but I'm not totally sure. The short thesis on Omeros is just not true, so I think that's pretty simple. I shorted more Neurotrope. I'll go through the portfolio in a minute, but those are a few additions to the current opinions list. All right, so like I said, first bad week ever for this nascent portfolio. And I did some more analytics. My win-loss ratio, I think it's over 30 stocks, is about 83%, which is humbling. Not humbling, I'm trying to remain humble. It's remarkable. It won't last forever. My long-term average is in the 60s, but I've also become a better investor over time, so we'll have to see if that'll continue, but I'm very proud of that. I made a few moves here. I sold all the Horizon, so if you own any Horizon, it's not because of me. I started shorting Ironwood, which I think this could be a really big short. I just started with a small position. And then I doubled up on Neurotrope, which I think is a 0, so now Neurotrope is my number 1 short. This is a company with a fake drug. It's basically fake news. Its market cap is much bigger than it looks because they have all these warrants. So the Treasury method market cap is closer to 200 million. The stock should be at 0. So that's sort of my 2 cents on Neurotrope. It's above the price where it was when they told us that their drug doesn't work. The stock was in the 20s, of course, at one point right prior to the trial, but you can sort of ignore the hype period that existed here. And I just don't think it's a real company. It's kind of a scam. So Neurotrope is a pretty good short. Anyway, I'm confident in Acadia, which continues to show some pretty crappy sales numbers, and I think there's some other weaknesses there. I'll go through some other time. Insight, I think, is overvalued, and I don't know that their IDO drug really adds any value from what I can tell. So I think Jakafi is just not that valuable. Its growth is starting to slow. I think the Neurocrine launch will disappoint. I think the medicines company is vastly overvalued. They don't really have any substantial assets. I went through Neurotrope, which is now there, sorry. I'm short Sihuan. Ironwood, like I said, this could be a 4 or 5% short someday, so we'll go through that at some point. I have some tech stocks, Weibo, Tableau, Snapchat, and Twitter, which is just letting me kind of learn the tech space, the software space a little bit more. I got my secret biotech short that I still have to work on. I hadn't changed the longs too much. I didn't do anything really. I only got Horizon sold, so I'm almost market neutral. And in fact, if you strip out, let's see, Gilead and Bristol Myers and GSK, I'd say that I'm really, really close to market neutral or net short. So anyway, that's sort of the portfolio moves. I am glad that with half the exposure and only probably a good quarter of real managing, I've almost equaled the S&P return, which is kind of, again, really lucky, I'd say, and amazing. I don't think it'll last forever. But if you grossed up all the returns, it'd probably be in the 20-something% for a apples-to-apples comparison. So I'm very, very lucky for that. So we'll see how that'll change. Lots of crazy news for the week. I mean, almost unbelievable amount of news. So let's kind of go through a bunch of it. So this is an interesting situation with Novartis's Ilaris drug. This is an IL-1 antibody. I tried to buy this from Novartis. They declined to sell it to me because it's a great drug. Let's see. Here's the story about it. They did a trial called Cantos, and in high-risk cardiovascular patients, the drug stopped heart attacks. So this could be, you can see some analysts are saying this could be a $2 billion drug. Now, I wanted to buy, Regeneron has a similar version of this drug, and Insight is INCY. So anyway, Regeneron has a similar version of this drug, and I also wanted to buy that drug. So this is kind of an interesting, I've personally watched these drugs pretty closely, but it was really remarkable that this drug for rare diseases now works to prevent heart attacks or what have you. So really impressive results there. And then Merck's anacetrapib worked. This is a CETP inhibitor. I think Pfizer's failed, Lilly's failed, and Roche's failed, and Merck somehow worked. So that was really bizarre. Bayer actually said that their earnings would be lower than expected. So very strange report from Bayer as they try to close Monsanto. I thought that was really bizarre. The Sarepta CEO, Bob Ingram, just started. He's a pretty well-known guy in pharma, very much a liked person. He's a very interesting compensation arrangement. He's going to get a lot of stock, depending on how fast he can grow the stock price, which is pretty neat. A NAV1 drug bit the dust. I think I've told all you guys, I think if you can make a good NAV1 and 1.7 inhibitor, you could have an enormous, probably one of the biggest drugs ever. But one drug died there. A small private company called Chromocell and Astellas have a private, not a private, but a NAV 1.7 drug in phase 1 multiple ascending dose study. So that'll be pretty interesting to see if that moves along. I'm starting to wonder if you can drug NAV 1.7 or not. For anyone who doesn't know, this is the non-opioid painkiller based on patients who have a genetic inability to feel pain, which is pretty incredible. So being able to induce that mutation through a knock-in would be probably one of the biggest drugs of all time. It would reduce the need for opioids and so forth. But like I said, the Teva drug didn't work. This was a topical NaV1.7, kind of interestingly. So we'll see if the Astellas drug will work. Regeneron has had a little bit of a hard time lately as people are thinking their new antibody for eczema is not going to sell well. And when I say it's having a hard time right lately, this doesn't look like too much of a hard time. But obviously, whenever you launch a drug, people are very, very focused on, the market's very, very focused on whether or not the launch will be good. And it sort of seems like the launch is slowing a little bit. Now, launches are weird things, and again, we'll see how this one pans out, but I'm still bullish on Regeneron. So, I don't think 1 week or 2 weeks of slow sales in a launch or anything to be too worried about, but obviously it's a little bit strange. Alexion is having a good quarter, so I think when they report their quarter, you could see the stock go to 130 or 140. This was the time to buy Alexion, as you can see. Needless to say, this was the opportunity. That's when we all really loaded up, hopefully. As it's sort of come back, it's still a very cheap stock. I still think it's worth $200. I know this company really, really well. But it's clearly, a company that has to make some moves and re-energize themselves a little bit. I think they'll be okay. Interestingly, I didn't put it in the PowerPoint, but Alexion did have a positive recommendation from the European Commission for myasthenia gravis, and I think that they will get FDA approval for myasthenia gravis. If they do, and the stock wasn't really up on that news, but if you get European approval for myasthenia, you probably get most of the rest of the world, and the myasthenia opportunity could actually double the sales of Soliris. So, Alexion should have been up $10, so it still really is a great long. But like I said, we really got it at dirt cheap prices in the 100 range. So I think there'll be a big continued success with Alexion, and that's why it's my biggest investment. Alkermes had some data for their antipsychotic. I don't know that the world needs another antipsychotic like this. Again, I haven't looked at it too closely, but it's certainly a stock I've looked to short, and we'll have to look at that. The Seattle Genetics data was not welcomed. I didn't think it was so bad. I don't think Seattle Genetics is that cheap, but it really could be a good long here. But I'm not sure. So, got to look at that a little bit. Mersana went public. Generic drug companies have had a lot of issues with a lot of different issues. And the FDA is now saying they're going to approve generics faster. I'm not sure if this helps them or hurts them. The market doesn't seem to think it's going to help them too much. The New England Journal put out a really interesting, published a really interesting paper of, I think this is a transcutaneous direct current stimulation. So this is just literally voltage of electricity to your brain. It's extracranial. You just wear a little thing, and it zaps you. Some people use this for increased intelligence. I would definitely look it up if you're interested. And they compared it to Lexapro, and the antidepressant, versus placebo in depression. And I think this was the MADRS endpoint, and you can see Lexapro beat, numerically, not statistically, beat TDCS, and the TDCS beat placebo, which is pretty impressive to me. So if you have depression, this is certainly, there are some side effects, but it's literally just a little device you wear, and it zaps your brain a little bit, and it's not so invasive. It's not as dangerous as a pill with all of its side effects. Not that Lexapro is really that dangerous, but it is definitely kind of was fun to see that transcutaneal direct current stimulation could actually beat and separate from placebo, even if modestly, in depression. Pretty neat there. The Alder migraine antibody, CGRP antibody, had pretty bad data, and I don't think people really understand how bad it is. So I pulled together all the Amgen and Lilly data, and obviously the stock fell a lot, as you can see, but it's probably going to keep going down. And you could have shorted it. Let's see here. You could have shorted it kind of halfway through the day, and you could have made a lot of money because this thing was really bad. Um, so the number of net changes in migraine days you only got about one less day of migraines, and if you look at the Amgen and Lilly trials for pretty much what's the same antibody, they got a little closer to 2. So if the high dose here for Amgen was 1.9 and about 1.9 to 2 net fewer migraine days for Lilly and Amgen, these are going to be big multi-billion-dollar drugs. Alder's going to disappear. So goodbye, Alder. BioVeritiv bought True North. This is a private company. I would have bought this company if I was able to. They paid about $400 million, which I think is going to be a pretty good deal for BioVeritiv. So good job to them. So this is definitely one of the more promising private biotech companies out there. In tech, I don't have a heck of a lot. I do try to get this webcast out by the evening of Sunday every week, and I have a lot of things going on this week, so I wasn't able to do a whole heck of a lot in tech. I also have a private company that I manage, so there isn't a whole lot of time right now for investing, but again, that'll change in a few weeks. Apple is definitely developing some kind of glasses product. It'll be interesting to see. The AirPod product has done amazingly well as well. So it's interesting to see Apple's sort of, evolution. Whether it's going to be cars or glasses or anything else, we'll have to see. The new iPhone will be waterproof, which is going to be welcome for me at least, and I think many other folks, and we'll have wireless charging, which will be pretty interesting. No doubt it'll be really interesting to see how they try to pull it off, and I do think, again, we'll see if they can take any market share or keep their very large market share. But I do think that there's a super cycle here with an even higher pricing, which is the most important point. These products should approach PC pricing with a faster kind of refresh cycle. But they have to keep up the innovation, and that's not going to be easy. But again, things like AirPods let you have these really high-margin peripherals, which are kind of exciting. So you have this sort of connected body, if you will. If you think about glasses, watch, AirPods, and phone, you've really got this, what's becoming a connected person more than anything else, with the Dexcom glucose monitor and the watch, and etc. You really have an opportunity to be a fully computer sort of connected person, and I think that's probably going to happen. Google got fined by the European antitrust folks. I think it's amazing to see how toothless most of these entities are. It was a $3 billion fine, but that's really such a minuscule amount to Google. $3 billion was less than 0.5% of their market cap, so that was kind of interesting. I got some good questions. Didn't get too many questions, and I encourage you guys to email me at martin@thoughtpatrol.com. Lyndon asked, do you include goodwill and intangibles in return calculations? So traditionally you don't, but you can't ignore the question's important, because if you ignore goodwill and intangibles, a company could theoretically continue to buy assets, right? And what ends up happening is, if you just keep buying assets, some of those return metrics will get distorted, and you might want to do some of your own custom concepts and sort of think about whether or not the company's incremental, what is a company really getting on an acquisition? And goodwill is kind of a bad way to look at an acquisition, but at the same time, depending on what really is going into goodwill, capitalizing the acquisition is what goodwill is, of course, but you might want to recapitalize it as, the acquisition, the actual acquisition, and do some kind of return on acquisitions. But anyway, think about kind of always think about what you're doing in these return calculations. And you can do a lot of custom ones, and it's important to it's important to kind of make sure that whatever return calculation you're doing makes sense. So try to sort of think about exactly what you're trying to embody when you're doing a return calculation. I wouldn't do them blindly. I would do them very, very carefully. That's kind of the way I'd think about return calculations. So the question is sort of doesn't have an answer. It sort of depends on what exactly you're trying to interpolate, I guess. Brian asked me about Dynavax. As I mentioned, I hate intratumoral drugs. Another different Brian asked me about CRISPR. I'm not a fan of CRISPR. I think you're going to have the same intercellular penetration problem that you get with any large protein. CRISPR is not native extracellular, so it needs to transduce somehow intracellular, and I don't think you'll be able to get enough transduction in any specific way that will be easy to do. So CRISPR's a waste. There are going to be a couple of, just like antisense and gene therapy, there might be some tissue beds that'll work, kind of CRISPR will work in. Spencer asked me about REITs. I don't know anything about REITs. Sorry, Spencer. So that's it for this week. Again, another short week, and my guess is next week's will also be somewhat short. But you can email me at martin@thoughtpatrol.com. There's a Twitter that one of my fans runs called BLM Bro, and occasionally I'll tell that fan to post something that I'd like them to post, but I don't control this account. You can also sign up for my private software company, which I'm very excited about, called Godel Systems. Godel's got about 10 employees here in New York and the rest of the country. We're growing quickly, and I think we're making some amazing software, and if you like this podcast, you'll really like Godel, so definitely check out godel.systems and sign up for beta testing or whatever. Trust me, it's worth it. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much.